you, Rabbi Wild, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here tonight. It's quite humbling for me to stand here representing Tzahal today, for I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate to be the one commemorating and not commemorated. I'm fortunate that during my service, I was not in the unfortunate circumstance of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I am fortunate that the shooting that took place at a checkpoint where I guarded happened when I was not there. Or that the Qassam rockets that was shot in our direction fell hundreds of yards from us. I am fortunate. So today, I remember those who were less fortunate than I, who gave their entire life so that Israel and all of us can be saved. I hope that by understanding the sacrifice that every soldier makes, we can all better understand and appreciate those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. For several months during my service, my unit was stationed on the Gaza border, and one of our responsibilities was to patrol the fence to ensure that no one trespassed. Along the fence, this is the Gaza border, along the fence we had paved sand in which experienced trackers would be able to determine whether or not there were footsteps that crossed. We'd run this two-jeep operation several times a day, and we'd drive slowly and watch vigilantly to make sure that the area was safe. Along the border and on the fence, there were signs. The idea of putting several signs in areas where there have been shootings, where there have been bomb explosions, which have injured or killed soldiers like me who were patrolling the border. So while these signs were there for us to remain vigilant and to inform us that these are some dangerous areas, I couldn't help but think of those soldiers who were just like me, running the same routine operation, but had the unfortunate circumstance of having a bomb explode right underneath their Jeep. See, this fickleness and sense of arbitrariness is the reality of the life of IDF soldiers as they ensure the protection of all of Israel. Nevertheless, I love my service. Unlike most Israelis, I volunteered to join the IDF. I knew what I was signing up for. I enlisted enthusiastically, idealistically, and found every day of my service to be rewarding and meaningful, taking part in something that was greater than myself, and following the footsteps of my ancestors who started this journey thousands of years ago. I enjoyed developing strong relationships with different walks of life. For example, my buddy in our buddy system in the army was Yossi, an Ethiopian Jew. I loved being pushed to my mental and physical limits as we engaged in really intensive exercises. I liked learning about weaponry and war strategy, be it urban warfare, or learning how to capture a hilltop as a battalion. But it was all fun and exciting for me, except for one thing. There was one little thing looming in the back of my mind throughout my entire service. See, I enlisted during the Second Lebanon War, and what people forget is that even though most of the danger and action was up north, on the border of Lebanon, there were indiscriminate rocket launchings from Gaza. As a result, much of our training was focused on urban warfare, as we were anticipating a major operation in Gaza, which ended up being Oferet Yitzukah, to neutralize that threat. Now, I loved the training. For me, it was like one big intense game of laser tag. But no matter how prepared I felt, I wasn't prepared to die. And the fear of death can be paralyzing in a time of crisis. It took around a year for me to psychologically prepare myself for death. I had just completed a commander's course and was training and commanding a squad of 10 soldiers. And if I were to lead, if I were to expect my soldiers to follow after me when I screamed, "Acharai listaer," after me, let's charge, they needed to feel secure in my leadership. Now the fear was still there, but I was prepared to give whatever it took to ensure safety in Israel. There was one moment that I felt that I was really tested. My unit was stationed on the Gaza border. We were living in a large bunker which our responsibilities were to patrol the Gaza border. We had soldiers stationed in watchtowers along different hilltops around the border, and we performed the occasional stakeout. It was a Wednesday morning, like any other morning, when I was the commander on shift for the patrol, which consisted of 2 jeeps, 1 tracker, 2 drivers, and 4 of my soldiers. As we did every day, we grabbed our breakfast in these to-go containers, drove to a nearby hilltop where we had a watchtower. We delivered our breakfast to those guards, and then stood outside the jeep eating our food on top of the vehicles, keeping our eyes on the border, which stood approximately 400 meters away as we gazed from this nice hilltop. But that day was a peculiar day. That day, for some reason, an Army officer authorized a Canadian tour group to park their vehicle at the bottom of the hilltop so that these 50 Canadian tourists would be able to climb the hilltop to gaze into Gaza and see what the view was like. All of a sudden, I heard too familiar of a sound. A machine gunner from the other side of the fence started shooting at the tourists on the hilltop. I was mid-bite, eating my breakfast, when I turned to the right, and like a scene out of a movie, this group of 50 tourists were on the ground, husbands clenching their wives clenching their children, screaming, "Get down, get down!" crawling and retreating back to their bus. And somebody suddenly screamed, "Someone's been hit!" You can imagine the panic that I was in as the commander on the hilltop. Tens of people are in danger, at least 1 person is injured, and still we're being shot at. So I immediately called my group and said, "Get in the Jeep." I radioed the incident into our main station, calling for backup. While we got in the car, drove down the hill, and as we got closer to the fence, jumped out, returned fire to subdue the shooter and to neutralize the threat. Keep in mind, we actually had no idea where the shooter was shooting from, as he was buried under some trench, and we were just shooting in that general direction. We actually did not know where that threat was from. Now, I was nervous as hell, but as we were driving down the hill, there was one real fear that I had, and it wasn't the fear of me dying. It was the thought that if something happens to me, how will my mother recover? I was 3 weeks away from my last day of service, and that news would absolutely destroy her. I had a year to mentally prepare myself for a moment like this, but what I didn't think about until that very moment was that preparation stopped at me. Parents are never prepared. Siblings are never prepared. Friends are not prepared. When a soldier dies in Israel, those families are never the same. Their death impacts their family, community, and the soul of Israel. My father's cousin, Yoel Schwartz, who is my brother's namesake, was only 17 years old when he was accepted to the IDF's elite unit at Goz in 1966. He died on the very first day of the 6-Day War. My father remembered Yoel's father as one of those guys constantly whistling and singing as he strolled around the kibbutz. After Yoel's death, he no longer whistled. I spoke to Yoel's younger sister last week, and she tried describing to me what it was like to be 12 years old when she was called out of her classroom to be told that her only brother had died. At that young age, she took it upon herself to help take care of her parents who were suffering from a silent depression, a reality a 12-year-old child should never have to face. Yom HaZikaron is a somber day in Israel, but it is also a unifying day. It is the one day during the year in which Am Yisrael can put their differences aside and reflect on the qualities of unity and sacrifice we strive for as a community. By commemorating our fallen soldiers, we can honor their deaths. By remembering them and the values they and countless Chayalim live by, we can honor their lives. I dedicate this Yom HaZikaron to Yoel Schwartz, my father's cousin who enlisted to the Army at 17 years old and lost his life at only 18 during the 6-Day War. He loved the outdoors and loved building things and anything technology related. He loved music, sneaking rock and roll into the kibbutz even though it was forbidden at the time. His family was never the same after his death, as he was survived by his parents, 2 sisters, and his high school sweetheart. Yehi Zikra Baruch.
I am Avi Alon, and I served in Field Infantry Brigade from 2004 to 2007, and in the Reserve Infantry Company of the 401 Armored Corps Brigade since 2008. I dedicate this Yom HaZikaron to Captain Natan Cohen, who was a platoon commander in 401 Armored Corps Brigade and was killed during Tzuk Eitan operation in 2014. Natan was second generation in the Armored Corps, and Itai, the oldest among his 4 younger brothers, also served as a combat soldier in 401 Brigade during Protective Edge. At one point, during the operation, Itai saw Natan walking outside of his tank. When Itai asked why Natan was not in the tank, he realized that Natan was carrying food for one of the bulldozer operators from the Combat Engineering Battalion. This is who he was as I read about him, the kind of person who always takes care of others. Natan was also engaged to Tal, who he was dating for 4 years. They were supposed to be married 3 months later. I did not know Natan, but we served in the same battalion, which was part of a large task force responsible for tracing and destroying one of the terror bombs dug by Hamas in the northern part of Gaza Street. At one point, I led my team from my platoon to collect supplies for my company. On our way, a sniper targeted us, but we managed to take cover and complete our mission before anyone was hurt. My team was lucky. A few days later, Natan led a force that responded to heavy fire from Hamas on IDF team that exposed the exact terror tunnel that my task force was looking for 2 weeks. During the battle, Natan slightly pulled his head out of the tank commander hatch to operate one of the weapons. At that moment, a bullet, most likely shot by the exactly same sniper that targeted my team just a few days earlier, hit Natan in the head. Natan died immediately, but his team kept fighting until they eliminated the risk. I'll never forget the look on our battalion commander's face that day. He came to debrief my company, and I could immediately tell that something happened, that something broke in him. And then he said, I lost a really good officer today. Yehi Zikra Baruch.
My name is